Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here again, taking that stack of research you provide, those dense anthropological studies, historical documents, and, well, we're turning it into essential knowledge.
That's the goal.
And today, we're going deep, really deep into the spiritual world and history of the Mapuche people. They've kept this incredible cultural independence for centuries in south-central Chile and southwestern Argentina.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. Our focus today, this deep dive, is squarely on Mapuche religion.
Yeah.
But, this isn't just about listing gods or spirits.
No.
We're investigating one of the most, I'd say, resilient and profound belief systems in the Americas. The sources we're working with, they really zero in on their ancient cosmology, the absolutely central role of the shaman, the machi, and something really critical,
Which is?
how they actually perceive and honestly interact with history and time itself. It's fascinating.
And what hits you right away is that this isn't some neat, tidy doctrine. We're not talking about a single, unified belief system here.
Definitely not. It's ancient, it's extensive, and crucially, it's often non-homogeneous. It really varies, from family to family, village to village, different regions.
So our mission today, our goal for this deep dive, is to try and unpack these really complex spiritual realms. We want to understand why the machi is so central to keeping everything in balance, that cosmic equilibrium.
And how these core beliefs haven't just survived, but have actually been used, almost weaponized, as a form of spiritual agency.
Right. To actively push back against centuries of colonial influence and, well, modernity itself.
It's really a study in resilience, isn't it? Where the spiritual world provides the actual playbook for historical survival.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this. And maybe the best place to start is with something fundamental, a real point of conflict in this whole story, the idea of time.
Absolutely.
Because when you contrast the Mapuche worldview with, say, the European systems brought by colonization, time itself feels like the first big philosophical battleground.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, the Western rational framework, it pretty much demands linear time.
Right.
A straight line, past, present, future, done, recorded.
Yeah, one direction.
But the Mapuche, fundamentally, they reject that kind of rigidity. They operate with a much more cyclic concept of time. And this is so key.
Why is it so critical?
Because it means events aren't necessarily just over. They repeat, they can spiral back, and the past.
Well, the past is always accessible. It's active right here in the present.
Wow. That idea of the past being available, that sounds like it offers incredible power, spiritually, psychologically.
It does.
If everything's cycling, then, a setback isn't final. It's just part of a bigger pattern that eventually circles back towards balance.
Exactly. And because it's flexible like that, and because, as we said, the belief system is decentralized, lots of variations between families, groups, it resists being easily pinned down or changed by outside forces.
It's too fluid, maybe.
Yeah, too fluid to just grab hold of. But structurally, the universe itself, they have a clear map for it. It's based on two fundamental realms that interact. Okay, so how do they see the cosmos laid out spatially? If we're humans here in the middle, what's above and below? And how do these realms connect?
You can think of it using two planes. There's the spiritual plane, which is vertical, right? And then the earthly plane, which is horizontal.
Got it. Vertical and horizontal.
The vertical plane, that defines our spiritual connection. So way up top, you have Wenu Mapu. That translates roughly as the land of above.
Okay, the upper world.
It's this sacred, invisible space. It's where the divine family resides along with good spirits, the ancestors. It's the source of goodness, protection, moral guidance.
And then the opposite. Below us must be the realm of chaos.
That's ngen Mapu, the underworld.
Yeah.
This is seen as the origin point, the location of the force of evil, and these malignant spirits they call the Wekufu.
Wekufu.
These are the forces blamed for bad luck, for illness, for conflict in society.
And we humans, we're stuck in the middle, on that horizontal plane.
Exactly. That's Nagmapu, the central land, or more simply, the land that we walk on. It's the visible world where humans and nature live, situated right between those two powerful, often opposing spiritual worlds above and below.
In our position there, in the Nagmapu, it sort of defines our purpose, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Our whole existence on Nagmapu is this constant balancing act. Daily life, the seasons changing, big historical events, all these things dictate which spiritual rituals, which practices are needed just to keep that equilibrium.
To keep things in harmony.
Yeah, to stop the world from falling into the chaos of Minchimapu or, being destroyed, like in their myths.
Okay, let's talk about that divine family up in Wanu Mapu, the creator spirit ngen. What's really interesting here, the sources say ngen isn't just one single entity.
That's right. Ngen is the central creative force, often called the master of the people, but it embodies this profound spiritual multiplicity.
Okay.
It's not static. It can manifest in 4 distinct forms, often understood as existing simultaneously. An older man, an older woman, a young man, and a young woman.
That fluidity across gender and age seems really significant. Why is that important, do you think, that the creator has these 4 aspects?
Well, it probably reflects the collective nature of Mapuche society itself and this core principle of complementarity, of balance. The older generation brings wisdom, the younger brings vitality.
And male and female aspects together.
Exactly. It ensures the creator embodies the total balance needed for cosmic order. It's like a continuously regenerating divine entity, always complete.
And beyond ngen, there are other key spiritual figures, right? Often tied directly to the physical world.
Oh, absolutely. You have the Pilin and Wangalan. These are powerful ancestral spirits. They're often linked to the really immense, sometimes scary forces of nature, mountains, thunder, volcanoes.
Protectors, but maybe also judges.
Yeah, they can be both.
Yeah.
Then you have the ngen. These are often described as the owners or guardian spirits tied to specific parts of nature.
Then Endins sound like a perfect example of that deep animism in Mapuche religion. Everything has a spirit.
Precisely. They are spirits living in nature. There's an ngen of the forest, an ngen for the river, maybe an ngen for a particular sacred rock. Their job is to maintain the integrity of that specific ecosystem.
So respecting the ngen is crucial.
Absolutely critical. If you mess with the balance of the forest, say the forest spirit might withdraw its gifts, its resources, or could even cause harm. It directly links spiritual morality with taking care of the environment.
And then back to the opposition again. The Wekufu, those malignant spirits from below.
Right. They are the agents of disorder, the evil spirits. They're often connected to conflict, especially internal conflict, sorcery, and basically anything that disrupts that sacred balance we talked about. They're the forces from Minyeche Mapu, always trying to mess things up here on Nagmapu.
All these different players in Kineshin, Pilin, and in Wekufu, they seem to come together really dramatically in the Mapuche creation myth, the primordial deluge story, or Epu.
Oh, spectacular.
It's more than just a flood story, isn't it? It sounds like a narrative of ultimate cosmic war.
It really is a spectacular, kind of terrifying origin story.
Yeah.
And it's driven by these 2 massive opposing serpent forces, primordial serpents.
Okay.
On one side, you got Kai Kai. Kai Kai is the water serpent. Its goal is to destroy the world with floods, bringing death and chaos. Total destruction.
And opposing Kai Kai
is Tren Tren. Tren Tren is the dry earth serpent. As Kai Kai floods the world, Tren Tren reacts by making the hills and mountains rise higher and higher, providing refuge. It brings sunshine, evaporation, basically trying to save humanity and the animals clinging to its back.
So it's this constant dynamic battle, water versus earth, destruction versus resilience. How does this specific Ipu, this story, actually resolve, given the extreme stakes?
Well, the sources point to this moment of incredibly high drama and a really severe resolution. After the flood pretty much destroys everything, only one human couple survives. They're stranded on the very highest peak, raised by Tren Tren.
Just 2 people left.
Yeah. And to finally restore cosmic order, to appease these massive spiritual forces, a machi, a shaman, appears and demands the ultimate sacrifice.
It is.
The couple's only child. The child must be thrown into the water.
Wow. That is a radical price to pay for cosmic harmony.
It is. And that act right there, it really underpins the sacred importance, the power of the machi's role. It establishes that only through this kind of intentional, spiritually guided sacrifice, giving up the most precious thing, an innocent life, can that crucial balance be guaranteed. It's almost a theological justification for radical intervention when things get dire.
And it perfectly sets the stage for the immense power held by the Mapuche shaman.
Yeah.
Which brings us, perfectly to the machi, the shaman. Given that constant spiritual tug-of-war between Wenu Mapu and Minyeche Mapu, always impacting our world, the Nagmapu,
Right.
the machi isn't just important, they sound structurally necessary.
Oh, completely necessary. For the survival of the community, absolutely. They are the central axis, really, of the whole belief system, the indispensable intermediary.
And the role is usually filled by a woman.
Usually, yes, though not exclusively. And the path to becoming a machi is tough. It usually involves a long, sometimes quite traumatic apprenticeship under an older, experienced machi.
And their job description, it seems almost endless. Based on the sources, they're healers, priests, kind of like meteorologists, social workers, all rolled into one.
That's a good way to put it. Their functions are incredibly broad. Curing diseases, especially those thought to be caused by the wekufu.
Right, the evil spirits.
Warding off evil generally, influencing the weather, which is crucial for farming, right? Ensuring a good harvest, helping smooth over social tensions, interpreting dreams, giving those dreams spiritual weight and meaning.
It's this amazing mix of spiritual mastery, but also really practical, grounded knowledge. The sources really emphasize their deep understanding of the local environment.
That's absolutely critical. Machis are essentially living libraries of ethnobotany, of local ecological science. They know the regional medicinal herbs inside out.
Not just what they do physically, but spiritually too.
Exactly. They understand which plants, which stones, even which animals are not just medically useful, but are considered sacred, possessing their own spiritual power, their ngen, and they know how to mobilize that natural power in their healing rituals.
And all this work, this constant spiritual and physical effort, it's all aimed at that one big goal: maintaining balance, keeping that Nag-Mapu equilibrium. What kind of practices does that actually involve day to day or season to season?
It means you need frequent, very intentional interaction with the spiritual world. This can involve big communal rituals, sometimes quite elaborate, with prayer, music, chanting, dance, often animal sacrifice.
The sacrifice seems key.
It is. The sources mention these sacrifices, sometimes for the whole community together, sometimes just for a single family, are fundamental. They're seen as necessary to satisfy the good spirits and keep the forces of evil, the wekufu, pushed back.
And this commitment to ritual, it sounds like it persists really strongly, even when faced with modern state institutions, modern laws. Which brings us to that really shocking anecdote you mentioned earlier, the one documented in the sources, about what happened after the huge 1960 earthquake and tsunami in Chile.
Yes. That 1960 Valdivia earthquake, I mean, it was one of the biggest ever recorded globally. A truly massive disaster. For the Mapuche communities affected, it must have felt like the world was literally coming apart. Like that primordial chaos from the EPO myth was returning.
A real cosmic crisis.
Absolutely. And in the aftermath, there's this documented case from the coastal town of Malenka. It describes a machi performing an incredibly radical ritual.
Which involved the sacrifice of a young boy.
Correct. The sources state the machi and the community, interpreting the earthquake and tsunami as proof that the chaos serpent, Kai Kai, was overwhelming the land again, sacrificed a young boy, they threw him into the water.
That's just staggering. Especially in 1960, it really highlights the seriousness, the persistence of these beliefs. What's the specific justification, though? How does that act restore cosmic order in their view?
The logic connects directly back to that EPO myth, the creation story. When the earth itself is shattered by such immense forces, the machi feels compelled, obligated almost, to reenact that primordial moment of restoration.
The original sacrifice.
Yes. The sacrifice is seen as the necessary offering to appease the spirit of the waters, Kai Kai, and also to activate the power of Tren Tren, the earth serpent, to stabilize the land again. It's a very stark example that for many Mapuche, their cosmology isn't just metaphor.
It's an active mandate.
It's an active, ongoing mandate to maintain reality, both physical and spiritual, regardless of what outside laws might say.
It really underscores that the Machi's authority, in their worldview, operates on a different level. It transcends state law because they're answering to a higher, more fundamental cosmic order.
Precisely. And, moving from this sort of standard machi who goes through the apprenticeship, there's a specialist category mentioned. The thunder shamans, the Tralcan.
Thunder shamans. That sounds powerful.
They're described as rare and exceptionally powerful.
What makes them so different? Why do they get to bypass the usual path?
Well, most machis are chosen through a process that often includes specific initiatory illnesses or afflictions, things like high fevers, mysterious boils, sometimes partial deafness. These are signs of their spiritual calling.
And then the long training.
And then the rigorous training with a master shaman, often for years. The Tralcan, the thunder shamans, they don't necessarily need that standard path. They seem to get their power directly.
How?
From a wild, raw, primordial force, specifically lightning and thunder.
Forces you absolutely cannot control or, teach in a classroom.
Exactly. They might be literally struck by lightning or spiritually chosen by those powerful Pillin spirits associated with storms and mountains. Their power, their ngen, is seen as instantaneous, wild.
Not learned, but received.
Received directly. It can't be controlled or mediated by human training.
Right.
So they're exceptional because their power is perceived as unfiltered, immediate, coming straight from the most potent forces in nature. They're often the ones called upon for the really big crises, the most severe cosmic imbalances, maybe battles involving really powerful wekufu.
So their power is seen as raw, immediate, maybe even a bit dangerous, making them incredibly potent figures, especially when dealing with huge, uncontrollable external threats, like colonization itself, perhaps.
And that immense power, the direct connection, it really sets the stage for how the machi, especially powerful ones like the Trollkin, engage with the past.
Right, because if time is cyclic, as you said, then history isn't just a fixed storybook collecting dust. It's more like a resource,
Yeah.
something active.
Exactly. It's a resource. And this brings us to that fundamental Mapuche rejection of the strict Western separation between memory and history.
How does that work? In Western thought, memory is personal, subjective, maybe unreliable. History is supposed to be objective, chronological, factual, often written down.
Right. But Mapuche culture, and particularly the consciousness of the machi, kind of blows that distinction apart. The stories the machi tells about the past, the narrative they construct, are considered verdadera historia.
True history.
True history. But true here doesn't mean fact-checked against a timeline, does it? What makes it true?
It's tied to a world of values, of morality, of spiritual continuity. If a story about the past confirms the moral structure of the Nagmapu, if it provides the necessary spiritual context for the present moment, then it is verdadera historia.
Regardless of whether it lines up perfectly with a linear, sort of positivist historical account.
Precisely. The Machi doesn't just recall history. They actively produce history. They shape it.
And they do this through, well, everything they do, it sounds like, not just telling stories.
That's right. They weave history through the texts they might use, through sacred ritual objects, through direct communication with spirits in trance, through the embodied performance of rituals, and through oral biographies, both their own and others. It's a constant, active, shamanic process of making historical consciousness real. And this process, this way of being, it fundamentally changes the person who does it. The sources use this striking term, double person, to describe the machi.
Yeah, that's a really specific and important concept.
What does it actually mean for a human to be, like, permanently inhabited by a spirit? How does that affect who they are?
It means a machi is never just one singular individual. They are, at a minimum, a double person. There's the human self, the one who interacts day to day. But there's also a spirit, often one that preordained their shamanic path, maybe even from birth, that permanently resides within them.
And the spirit guides them, speaks through them.
Yes, it guides, it speaks, it provides the new and the spiritual power they need. The human side manages the practical stuff, but the spirit often dictates the deeper destiny, the spiritual purpose.
And this personhood, it's not fixed either, is it? The sources describe it as fluid, reflecting what they call Mapuche centrifugal sociality. What's that about?
That fluidity is absolutely key to their power and influence. A machi doesn't just stay a double person, they actively expand their personhood. During trance, during major rituals, they incorporate aspects of others into themselves, other spirits, specific ancestors, powerful animals, even deities like ngen or pelin. They can literally become multiple beings all at once.
They could be simultaneously the shaman and the spirit speaking through them, human and divine at the same time.
Exactly. This multi-personal and also multi-temporal state allows them to operate outside the normal linear constraints of human time and individual identity.
Which leads to this incredibly interesting mechanism the sources describe for ensuring historical continuity when a powerful machi dies. This cycle of death and rebirth. What happens? How does the community handle that transition?
It's a very deliberate, ritualized process. The sources call it disremembering. When a great machi dies, the community has a collective task. They need to ritually strip the deceased individual of their specific personal characteristics, their personality quirks, their emotions, maybe any negative actions or transgressions they committed in life.
So they kind of purify the memory.
Yes, exactly. The positive aspects, their skills, their power, their successful actions, these are ritually separated and merged into a sort of generic, purified ancestor machi spirit. This collective spirit is called the Phailu.
The Phili. So it's like a spiritual essence, cleansed of the individual flaws. But this Phili, this ancestor spirit, it doesn't just stay dormant, right?
No, not at all. Think of it like a living historical database of shamanic power. That purified ancestor spirit, the Phailu, is later re-individualized. It's reborn into the body of a new chosen machi.
Ah, so that's the continuity.
That's the critical link. The new machi who receives this Phailu will often exhibit the specific temperament, the particular ritual skill, sometimes even the unique drumming style or chanting patterns of the deceased shaman whose essence they've inherited.
So when a new machi emerges, the community doesn't just see them as a new person starting out. They see them as the active walking embodiment of a positive, morally cleansed lineage of historical power.
Precisely. That's how the power of the past continues to live and act directly in the present.
It establishes this unbreakable, cyclical chain of spiritual authority, one that completely sidesteps and ignores linear colonial timelines and record-keeping.
It really does.
Okay, to really see this spiritual agency, this history-making in action, the sources give us two incredible case studies. Let's start with the predecessor to the second shaman we'll discuss, Francisca Colippi. This is Rosa Curran, who sounds like quite the figure back in the late 19th, early 20th century.
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Rosa Curran lived roughly 1873 to 1955. She was renowned, described as a wild drumming thunder shaman, so a Tralcan from Patagonia. But there's a really key detail about her heritage. She was Champuria.
Champuria, meaning mixed descent.
Yes, mixed German and Mapuche descent.
Now, usually in colonial situations, that kind of mixed heritage leads to being marginalized, viewed with suspicion by both sides. But the sources suggest for Rosa, it actually boosted her power. How did that work?
It's a fascinating inversion of the usual colonial logic. Her mixed background wasn't seen as a dilution, but as granting her special spiritual access. Not just the intelligence and the inherent spiritual power, Nuan of the Mapuche.
But also something from the German side.
Yes, what was perceived as the wealth power of the foreigners, the settlers. Because she had German ancestry, she was believed to have an innate ability to understand, to spiritually grapple with, and ultimately to combat the power structures being imposed by those European settlers.
So she could fight fire with fire, spiritually speaking.
Kind of, yeah. And this perceived ability was really leveraged by her community, Malali. They used her story, her history, to construct this incredibly powerful narrative of resistance, a narrative that essentially overwrites linear colonial history.
It's an amazing example of making that verdadera historia we talked about.
Exactly. The community needed a spiritual framework to understand and respond to the theft of their sacred land specifically, a sacred hill near Malali that had been taken over by a German settler named Juan Schleyer.
Okay, a historical event. Land theft by a settler. But they didn't just remember Schleyer as, a guy who grabbed some land between certain dates.
No. They collapsed him. They mythologized him. In their verdadera historia, Schleyer, the historical individual, gets merged into this single monstrous figure.
Who
A
is?
gigantic, incredibly powerful sorcerer who made pacts with the Lutheran devil.
The Lutheran devil. Why specify Lutheran? That's oddly specific.
It's deliberate. It allowed the Mapuche narrative to offer a spiritual critique of the specific values they saw driving colonization. This Lutheran devil wasn't just generally evil, he was directly linked to the obsession with individual profit, the relentless drive of capitalism, that sort of hyper-individualistic work ethic that just exploited the land without any respect for the endin, the spirits, or for the collective good.
So Schleyer's actions, clearing the land, building fences, accumulating personal wealth, they reframed all that. It wasn't just economic activity.
It was sorcery. It was the intentional inversion of sacred Mapuche ways performed on behalf of this devil of individualism and greed. Schleyer was practicing sorcery for capitalist accumulation. His whole project, the engine of colonization on their land, was spiritually defined as pure chaos, directly linked to the Wekufu and that destructive water serpent Kai Kai.
So if Schleyer becomes the embodiment of Kai Kai, the flood of chaos,
Bro.
then Rosa Curran, the thunder shaman.
She becomes his cosmic opponent. She is reimagined, recreated in the narrative as the primordial trend serpent spirit, the spirit of dry earth, stability, life.
The one who saves people from the flood.
Exactly. Rosa's historical role in this verdadera historia becomes saving the community from the spiritual and material deluge provoked by Schleyer's The Devil. She is the one who restored the moral cosmic order after Schleyer stole the community's wealth and desecrated their sacred hill.
That spiritual remapping is just brilliant. By mythologizing both Schleyer and Rosa like this, they become what the sources call multi-temporal beings.
Yes. They're effectively yanked out of that fixed linear timeline. Schleyer is no longer just a man who lived and died in certain years. He becomes the eternal symbol, the recurring agent of colonial chaos.
And Rosa.
Rosa isn't just a historical shaman. She becomes the perpetual spiritual victor, the embodiment of Tren, an ancestral power always available to the community in the present. This radical rewriting of history is just a core example of Mapuche spiritual agency in action, actively fighting, subverting, even obliterating the oppressive historical narratives imposed by the state.
Okay, so moving forward in time into the mid-20th century, we encounter the second key figure, Francisca Colipi, born around 1921. And her initiation as a machi was uniquely tied to that catastrophic event we discussed earlier.
The 1960 earthquake and tsunami,
Yeah.
yes. Being initiated during that moment of profound cosmic chaos immediately connected her, in the eyes of many, to the immense power and legitimacy of Rosa Curran, her predecessor, and that whole Trang serpent lineage associated with stability and survival.
But her authority wasn't easily accepted, was it? The sources say it was fiercely contested throughout her life.
It was, largely for two reasons. First, like Rosa, she was also Champiria of mixed heritage, which always brought scrutiny. And second, she actively challenged traditional gender norms for a machi.
How did she transgress those norms? What did she do?
Well, for one thing, she often traveled alone extensively, adopting a kind of independent mobility that was usually seen as the domain of male warrior shamans, not female healers.
Ah, okay. That would have raised eyebrows.
Definitely. It was seen by some as a profound violation of expectations, leading to constant gossip, accusations of sorcery, kelkutun, and challenges to her moral standing from rivals within the Mapuche community itself. Her very existence, her practices, forced the community to continually debate what it meant to be morally Mapuche in a rapidly changing world dominated by outside powers.
So she's dealing with internal conflict, external pressures. She needed a way to navigate all that, and she found a really powerful framework, it seems, in how she diagnosed illness, what they call wadakutram.
It was frankly a stroke of strategic genius. She started to interpret illness not just as a purely physical problem or even just caused by generic wekufu. She framed it as the history of ethnic conflict itself, literally embodied in the patient's suffering.
Wow. How did that work?
The wekufu, the evil spirits causing the sickness, were increasingly identified by her as the spirits of the non-Mapuche settlers, the Winca or Gringo. And crucially, these spirits inflicted illness through spreading their specific negative individualistic values.
So if you got sick, maybe with something vague the doctors couldn't fix, Francisca might diagnose it as the spirit of colonialism infecting you with, say, dishonesty or greed, stinginess.
Exactly, those kinds of settler values. This framework was incredibly clever on multiple levels. First, it allowed her to directly combat settler power and ideology using her own shamanic healing logic. She wasn't just treating symptoms, she was performing a kind of exorcism of colonial influence.
And
Second, and this was vital for her own standing and community cohesion, by externalizing the source of evil. Blaming the Winca spirits, she could significantly reduce the internal finger-pointing, the accusations of sorcery between Mapuche individuals and families.
Right. It reframed internal problems as everyone being under attack from the same outside enemy. Clever. But the real genius of Francisca, according to these sources, lies in how she dealt with the actual tools of the colonizer, especially texts and documents.
Yes, this is maybe the most fascinating part. She viewed things like a Christian Bible, official land titles, legal papers, government documents, not as inert secular objects.
Yeah.
She saw them as ritual objects infused with their own kind of power, their own nuin. She called it chilkanuin.
Chilkanuin, power residing in the written word, in the document itself.
Exactly. It's this remarkable leap of spiritual interpretation. It's like a form of shamanic literacy that goes way beyond just alphabetic reading. She recognized the immense power these documents held in the Winca world, the world of the settlers, and instead of just rejecting them or ignoring them.
She incorporated their power structure into her own cosmology.
Yes. She learned to manipulate their power for her own shamanic purposes.
Okay, how did she actually use her Catholic Bible ritually? That sounds like an incredible collision of spiritual systems.
The descriptions are amazing. She would apparently rub the Bible on her patients' bodies, almost like transferring its perceived sacred energy for healing.
Wow.
She would blow sacred tobacco smoke over the open Bible as if to awaken the power of God's words within it, activating its force. And perhaps most dramatically, when she believed she had captured an evil wekufu spirit during a healing ritual, often one representing a colonial sickness or value.
Yes.
She would slam the Bible shut, physically trapping the evil spirit inside the pages of the colonizer's sacred text.
That's incredible. The Bible itself becomes a spiritual prison, a containment unit for the very forces of colonialism it represented to some. She completely subverted its meaning.
She mastered the symbols of her oppressors and turned them into her tools. And she took this idea even further. Towards the end of her life, Francisca specifically requested that her own life story, her biography, be written down, documented like a Bible.
Your own Bible?
It's a very deliberate, strategic act. She intended this written biography to be a vessel, a container that would store her personal shamanic power, her ngen, long after her physical death. It would extend her legacy into the future.
It was her way of making her own life story, her own verdadera historia, tangible and powerful in the format the outside world recognized.
Exactly. It made her readable and perhaps more legitimate to non-Mapuche scholars, officials, maybe even future generations, encountering her story through text. But crucially for her and her followers, it ensured her unique spiritual power remained active, accessible, potent for future machi.
She literally demanded her spiritual agency be recorded and preserved using the very format of the dominant culture she spent her life resisting. That same refusal to be contained, to be finished, also seems evident in that strange cycle the sources mention of her multiple cataleptic deaths and rebirths near the end of her life.
Yes, that's another really unusual aspect of her story. Francisca apparently experienced several episodes where she seemed to die. She stopped breathing, grew cold, only for her spirit to return to her body hours or even days later.
And this had a ritual consequence.
The huge one. Because she kept coming back, she effectively prevented the community from fully completing that traditional process of disremembering her.
They couldn't merge her into the generic Falu ancestor spirit because she wasn't definitively gone.
Precisely. She didn't stay dead long enough for them to ritually cleanse her memory, to strip away her complex individual, often contested personality, and merge just the positive essence into the collective ancestor.
So she kept returning, retaining her full specific identity. And the sources say she used these returns strategically.
It seems so. Each time she returned from the dead, it was seen as a powerful divine intervention. She could use these moments to directly address social problems, correct perceived wrongs in the community, challenge narratives about her own controversial actions or character, and powerfully reestablish her authority through what looked like divine validation.
Wow, she was actively managing her own legacy, even through these near-death states.
Exactly. This repeated cycling, this refusal to be neatly processed into an ancestor figure, kept her unique power, the power of Francisca Calippi, the Champuria thunder shaman, whose shamanized modernity hyperspecific and incredibly active in the present. It ensured that when she finally did pass definitively, the process of her eventual spiritual integration would likely lead to the rebirth of a very particular, potent, and maybe even still controversial thunder shaman identity in the future.
An unending cycle, almost ensuring her unique stories, the specific history she forged, remains a living text, a living power. Hashtag outro.
You know, when you step back and look at the Mapuche experience, especially through the lives of machis like Rosa Corin and Francisca Colippi, what's truly revolutionary, I think, is the sheer depth and effectiveness of their cosmological agency.
It's not just an alternative belief system existing alongside others.
No, it's fundamentally different in its operation from that Western linear way of thinking. Their spiritual practice, their cosmology, isn't just about belief. It actively shapes, contests, and even remakes historical outcomes.
They use these incredible concepts, the fluid self, being multi-temporal, that shamanic rereading of texts, the Chilkanuan to directly fight back against, sometimes satirize, and effectively counter or even obliterate those dominant colonial narratives about linear progress and history being over.
Yeah, they demonstrate how cultural sovereignty isn't just a political goal. It can be actively maintained and enforced when history itself is understood and practiced as a moral and spiritual battlefield, constantly being re-engaged.
Their history isn't something that just passively happened to them, something to be objectively recorded and filed away.
No, it's something they actively make and constantly remake through ritual, through narrative, through the machi's intervention, ensuring the continuity and the moral balance of the Nagmapu. The shaman is the crucial, active agent in this ongoing historical production.
So thinking about this, what does it all mean for you listening to this deep dive? Maybe the ultimate legacy of the machi isn't just that they were healers or religious leaders. They were undeniably political and historical agents of profound significance.
Absolutely.
They took the very tools, the very documents, the very symbols of their oppressors, the Bible, land titles, the power inherent in official paper, and they transformed them. They turned these symbols of colonial domination into actual vessels of indigenous spiritual power, into weapons for maintaining their own sovereignty.
It's quite extraordinary.
Which leaves us with a really provocative question, one that kind of hangs over every account of Mapuche resistance and resilience. What happens when the sacred sphere, the spiritual realm, becomes the most effective battlefield? What does it really mean when history itself is not a closed book, but a weapon wielded by spiritual forces ensuring that the past remains perpetually alive, active, and capable of correcting the present?
It means the story is never truly over. It means Mapuche history, through this lens, simply refuses to accept its own defeat.
A truly powerful thought to end on. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into Sonara's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.